The Supreme Council of National Economy became the Bolsheviks' chief instrument for bringing Russia's industries under government control. The historical moment has arrived, Lenin wrote shortly after it came into being, when theory is being transformed into practice, vitalized by practice, corroded by practice, tested by practice. And when the words of Marx said, every step of real movement is more important than a dozen programs, it became particularly true. But reality failed to support his claims. As is in the Bolsheviks' first efforts to nationalize their land and banks in Russia, disorganization and confusion of purpose dogged the early steps that the Supreme Council of National Economy made towards nationalization. Contrary to the claims made by Lenin and scores of later Soviet commentators, the nationalization of Russia's industries followed no clear and certain plan before mid-1918. Certainly, the nationalization decrees issued by the Supreme Council of National Economy reflected little coherent planning, and in only about one case in four did they actually even implement policy decisions initiated by the Council itself. Far more often, the Supreme Council worked to prevent factories from being shut down by anti-Bolshevik managers, or to offset crudely conceived local seizures that threatened important factories and mines with inept management by homegrown Bolsheviks. Taken together, the nationalization decrees issued by the Supreme Council during the first 6 months of 1918 thus proved to be a far cry from the Red Guard assaults against the capital, of which so many Soviet commentators like to speak in Stalin's time. They had little in common with the process that Marx and Engels had envisioned when they had predicted that the proletariat will use its political power to gradually deprive the bourgeoisie of its entire capital and centralize means of production in the hands of the state, that is, the proletariat. At best, the Supreme Council's first attempts to nationalize Russia's industries reflected the Bolsheviks' overwhelming concern for self-defense and survival. Men and women thrown out of work when industrialists locked their factory gates, workers deprived of essential goods, food, and services by factory shutdowns, and factories crippled by shortages of raw materials and fuel, all added confusion to efforts by the Supreme Council to formulate broad policies and apply them consistently. The Bolsheviks' cherished dream of building socialism had little to do with the decision by the Supreme Council of National Economy to announce the immediate nationalization of all heavy industry and joint stock companies on June 28, 1918, despite later Soviet claims that the dictatorship of the proletariat thus granted the opportunity to carry through to a victorious conclusion the armed struggle against the foreign and domestic forces of counter-revolution. The Supreme Council's hastily prepared decision proved to be nothing more than an effort to sidestep the provisions of the Brest-Litovsk Treaty that required the Soviet government to pay direct compensation to German investors whose industries were nationalized after July 1st, 1918. Nonetheless, the decree marked a step towards more effective nationalizations, even though it took the better part of 2 years to bring individual industries and groups of industries under state control. By 1912, the Bolsheviks thus had established a permanent grip upon their nation's industry. Although the vagaries of the process and the disruptions inflicted by the Civil War had exacted such a terrible price that the industrial output of Central Russia, the red heart of the Bolsheviks' new state, had fallen to a mere 18% of what it had been on the eve of the Great War. The unsettled conditions in which factory workers lived and worked under the October Revolution reflected the disorganization of the Bolsheviks' efforts to nationalize their nation's economic life. Unemployment drained workers from Russia's cities so rapidly that Petrograd lost nearly 3/4 of its industrial labor force before the end of 1918. when Moscow lost 2 workers out of every 5 who had been in its factories when the Tsar was driven from the throne. A similar exodus swept across other cities in Central Russia. As epidemics combined with shortages of fuel, housing, and food to cloud their vision of the future, Russian proletarians dared not look beyond the present. We have reached the direst period in our revolution, Lenin told the 5th All-Russian Congress of Soviets in the summer of 1918. There has never been a more difficult period in workers' and peasants' Russia. Less than a month before, Gorky had published a 6-paragraph story about the horse that had collapsed in one of Moscow's streets from hunger and overwork. As he described the big dirt-stained tears that flowed from the dying beast's thin eyelids, Gorky commented matter-of-factly, "We will all soon die from lack of food. People too." As peasants and workers proceeded with the expropriation of the expropriators in Russia's cities and villages, bitter doctrinal disputes divided Bolsheviks, Mensheviks, and social revolutionaries. Should both large and small factories be nationalized, and how quickly? Should Russia's future be determined by the Constituent Assembly that liberals and revolutionaries had dreamed of for decades, and to the supposed wisdom of which they had referred countless complex problems throughout 1917? Or had the October Revolution transformed the Constituent Assembly, as Lenin insisted when he announced its dissolution, into bourgeoisie and counter-revolutionary instruments that threatened the very foundations of Russia's new proletarian socialist order? When the Constituent Assembly met for its single day-long meeting in January 1918, Mensheviks and so-called right socialist revolutionaries had stood on one side and the Bolsheviks on the other.
What up, Scarecrow?
Between us, everything is over, one of Moscow's leading Bolsheviks exclaimed.
Victory.
Red victory.
Red victory. Bitch.
Oh, I like history, bro. Let's go.
Yeah, there's a lot of history going on today, I think. Yeah, similar ideas.
Yeah.
Concepts. Hopefully it doesn't come to this, but if it does, I'll be... Yeah.
Well, I mean,
That's
I'd
really
say I
side
hope
I'd like to
not know
be
what it's
on.
about.
What's that?
I say I hope not. I don't actually know what it's about, so I can't comment. How are you doing today? Yeah? Good? Remember speaking last week? Yeah, sweet. You had a good week?
I did.
Yeah? What did you get up to?
I have a girlfriend now.
Girlfriend?
Yeah,
Yeah,
really?
congratulations.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
right after you guys left, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so,
Sweet. Well, I'm happy for you, man.
you know, I have to stop myself from getting too excited.
Yeah, it's very
I'm
sensible.
a lot of excitement. A lot of excitement, man. I gotta tone it down.
Yeah?
That's where I am. That's what I'm asking for when I go to church.
Yeah?
That's what I asked for when I went to church last week.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's paying off. But the thing is, you never just quite do it.
What do you get?
Grace.
Grace. You always have grace. That's the best thing about grace. It's free. It's a gift. You don't have to do anything to get it.
Yeah.
I can feel it waning sometimes. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's thin.
Like
Sometimes very
it
thin.
can feel that way, but like when you read the Bible, like the truth that's there, it's like it's God is not a feeling. He's constant. Like He's unchanging. His grace is like never ending. That is just like poured out on us. So even when we feel bad,
I suppose then it is that the grace is there, but my reception of it sometimes isn't quite. So,
absolutely, I definitely go through that as
you
well.
know, and
I was just found that a few days ago. I understand. Like I get it. Sometimes you feel like you can't accept all. Like you just feel like, yeah,
Don't
you're
feel
getting
like
so much
worthy.
grace, but you feel like they're not really giving it to me. They're giving me grace. You know what I mean?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely understand.
I think I don't know. All I have when I don't have that is patience.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's awesome.
The gift of the Spirit, like patience is awesome.
You guys are too things.
Just
Walking around.
yeah, talk about Jesus. Just like see if we can pray for people. Yeah.
You know, I think for me, sometimes I have this like when when I want to kind of reach out to people, sometimes it takes a couple pastors.
Yeah.
The Mormons are pretty good, man. Y'all,
Mormons are-
I
Yeah.
talked to them last week.
yeah, y'all kind of have like a different kind of like setup. But the thing I like about them, right, is, and as you guys do the same thing, is bringing that energy into the equation, not taking it away. When there's like another group, there's like a third group, and they believe in like the eternal mother or something. They think that there's like, they cited this to me that like there's female animals, and then also God says at one point like made in our image or something. But so they're saying that there's like a sacred mother or something, and that like she's like embodied in South Korea. And I don't know, it's kind of weird, but if you really listen to them, the thing that they're really good at, and I mean I'm not saying this is good or bad, but the thing they're really good at is telling you two different messages, the abstract and the literal, like simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something there. It's not. I'm not exactly sure if it's me for me, but there is something there.
I'd be careful.
Really, like if you like pick up on the energy and see, like, because they've talked to me like 3 times, and each time they like shied away from me.
Yeah.
It's that's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. They're not here like so much, but I always keep an eye out for them. I don't know.
Look, God will never shy away. He's always deceiving. He's always deceiving. That's like, he's such a personal God. Like, he just wants to know everyone. He just wants to know God. It's his son. It's his daughter.
You know, I'm not really used to such persistence.
Yeah.
Being, I did many things correctly, but I didn't do the one thing that mattered the most correctly. So things, I'm still stuck. I guess for me, the fresh convert is, I'm still waking up every day thinking that I'm back on the drawing board and starting over, but I'm not. Because there's that persistence there you're
Yeah,
talking
God
about.
is just always for sure. Do you know the story like the prodigal son?
Somebody told me about it last weekend, but I would love to hear you guys tell me about the
Yeah,
prodigal son.
yeah.
So the prodigals. Okay. So like, the kid comes back, but he's kind of like a brat, and then he's like begging his father. His father's like, "Here you go, I'm gonna give you all this." And then the other son's like, "I've done everything right. You didn't treat me like that."
Yeah.
It was like
so
a
I think
reward
like,
for coming back to the fold.
like the first son, like at the start of the story, he like asks for his inheritance. He's basically just saying like, I wish you were dead because then I can have all of your stuff because that's like more important.
Oh, I didn't read that part. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
read
it's
that
like
part.
I
Okay.
want my inheritance now. So it's like he's effectively saying that, and then he goes out, lives like this wild life, runs out of money, like basically has like no family.
Oh
no
yeah, he ran
friends.
off the inheritance. He did get the inheritance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
His dad was like, okay, I'm gonna bless you with it, even though, like, if it was if that was me, my son came up to me and was like, I wish you were dead, give me half your money, because like we have a brother, obviously. Like, it's not pull your act out. But God's like, okay, I'll bless you anyway. Like, I want you to experience life as you want to.
Yeah.
But like after he runs out of all this and he's just left with like nothing, he goes back to his dad. He's like, maybe I could just be like a servant. Like maybe he just like let me serve under him and like give me a little bit of food. And like before he even gets back to his dad like sees him from a distance, runs out to him, and is like embraces him, wraps him up in his cloak, gives him a ring, and he's like, the son's like, oh, like, you know, I'm so sorry, can I just be a servant? And like, he doesn't even respond. He's just like, quickly, like, calls the servants over. He's like, let's throw a feast. Like, my son is last. Like, just come back to me. And like, that's the persistence that God has. Like, he's looking out for you every day, just waiting for like you to come back to him. And like, he just wants to bless you and welcome you back into his family. And like, he just loves you so much. I just feel like you need to know, like, that persistence is never going to go away. He's always been looking out for you. Like, all you've got to do is turn around and come back to him.
I would like to embody that. I definitely have some personal takes on that. You know, because
Yeah.
everyone has their
Everyone
has
does.
their
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah.
personal faith.
It's written really well. It's written really well.
Well, it's Jesus' words, not mine. It's Luke 15 from verse 10, if you need to check it.
Do you have a Bible at home?
I do, but I
That's
like collecting them though. They're cool. They're pretty cool. I like my tiny little New Testament one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm all
Well,
about.
that'll be in there, Luke 15.
Yeah.
Did I tell you guys about the telescope?
No.
Okay. Well, it's more of like asking. It's actually more of a question, but
Okay.
I definitely want to. So this is like, for me, I have a tangible, concrete goal as a Christian. It's to prevent something from happening. But maybe you guys want this to happen. I don't know. So you're like pretty much seeing me right now, almost, but it still takes some time for like the light photons to like bounce off me and get to you. So you're kind of like seeing me a little bit in the past, but our minds don't move fast enough to like register that. However, yeah, that sun right there is actually the sun 8 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's not go to the sun because the sun's kind of really bright. Let's go to Mars. Maybe that's like 3 or 4 minutes, but we can make it 8 minutes if we put a mirror there. Okay. It's gonna take the light, as it go here and then back. Yeah. Okay. So you could see yourself walk up to the telescope. Yeah, because you'd be looking in the past. Okay. So if we don't have to even have these mirrors too far out. We might even be able to do it on Earth by bouncing enough of them. I don't know. But eventually, we will be able to see creation. That is a very big possibility.
Do you not think we can see creation now?
I mean, this has all been created, but like the moment that it happened, and that's a. I've gotten that response before from a very wise person. But I mean, yeah, we are witnessing creation, but like the actual Big Bang is something that can be seen, and it could be seen right now through this process I'm talking about. But I don't think anyone's trying to look at it. I think that will be the elimination of all things. I do. And furthermore, it must be prevented because those that get the telescope and the alignment of the mirrors and all that, they will not keep this information themselves. They will share it, I believe. It'll be everywhere. And at that point, being a Christian is no longer about faith. Now, so when I told the other person that said the same thing about how, well, yeah, this is creation.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. What he had said is that I am practicing blind faith, not true faith. He really wants to know. He said that about me, that I'm practicing blind faith. So I do practice blind faith. And I think that's the moment where blind faith will be ended. And so I hope to prevent that.
I think faith, to an extent, is blind by definition.
It ought to be, my friend. It ought to be. Dude, the first time I saw this guy, I thought he was an atheist. And like, he might just be the world's smartest atheist. I don't know. He might just be like, because he came here and gave a talk on campus, and there was like hundreds of us.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't know. Frank Turek.
Okay. I'll look him up.
Well, it's nice seeing you guys.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
Can we pray for you again? Is that alright? Yeah? What do you pray for? What's something you struggled with this week?
Boring basic shit.
Yeah, the humbling stuff.
I gotta be humbled. Yep. That's what I need right now is some humble.
Are they hands on you?
Some humble
Alright?
pie.
How about we pray for your girlfriend as well?
Yeah, is that alright?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
okay. You see him on Skype, right?
Yeah.
And what's your girlfriend's name?
Well, together it's murder. Together, me and her, it's murder. That's a flock of crows.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's her name without you? You, I don't know.
I never even like noticed her at all. She's not a girlfriend.
Okay. Well, I'll pray. Yeah, Lord, we thank you, Skype. We thank you that we had this meeting again. That was just like more conversation about you. That is good. We just really pray for Skype that you would, just keep an eye on this week, Lord. That you would just give opportunities to like the full self. Just really like take a step back and recognize like recognize what it is do things you might not want to. Just act in a way that is true to you, God. I just really pray that your spirit would come on board and that you would just really feel your presence. That you would just be answering these questions, Lord. That you would just be like, I pray that we don't
Amen. Here's a joke. And A women too. That fucking joke. That fucking joke.
have a good week, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, that's the plan. Stay frosty. as peasants and workers proceeded we and you are on different sides of the barricades. Yet, even among the Bolsheviks, disagreements burst forth. That same month, the Fourth Conference of Factory and Mill Committees in Petrograd called for immediate nationalization of all means of production, factories, and workshops, while the First Trade Union Congress insisted at the same time that the final exhaustion of the county dictates a definite gradualism. Clearly, men and women dedicated to the cause of revolution found it easier to agree on principles than on the practical method for putting them into practice. Such disagreements reflected persistent theoretical conflicts in the ranks of Russia's revolutionaries. Most long-standing and bitter was the cleavage between Mensheviks and Bolsheviks that had fostered ever since the embryonic Russian Social Democratic Labor Party had split in 1903. Then, Lenin had insisted that only a strong organization of professional revolutionaries could give the party the strength and discipline it needed to merge into a single whole, a spontaneous destructive force of the masses and the conscious destructive power of the revolutionaries' organization. By contrast, with the dedication that had matched Lenin's own, Martov had insisted that the party must require no more moral commitment to revolution from its members, and ought not to demand their unswerving dedication to its realization. Party, organization, and decision-making must remain democratic, Martov warned, and it must not follow the rigid, centralized model that Lenin favored. Guided by Lenin's precepts, the Bolsheviks had seized power in 1917, while their Menshevik rivals had continued to argue that the laws of history forbade them to take power because Russia's bourgeoisie revolution had not yet run its course. More broadly based than the Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks had attracted more supporters than the Bolsheviks, but the socialist revolutionaries had outnumbered them both. Large, loosely organized, and without the fixed dedication to the ideology of their Bolshevik and Menshevik rivals, Russia's Socialist Revolutionary Party had sprung from the neo-populist roots that had little consistency other than the long-standing dedication to the absolution of private land ownership. A conglomerate of discordant elements contending for possession of a label that commended the goodwill of rural Russia, in the words of their leading chroniclers. The socialist revolutionaries had drawn their main support from Russia's tens of thousands of peasants, not their hundreds of proletarian thousands, and that fact alone had convinced Lenin to incorporate their agrarian program on his decree on land. Led by Viktor Chernov, whose talent with a pen far exceeded his abilities to sway revolutionary crowds, the socialist revolutionaries had never unified their ranks enough to take full advantage of their huge following. In 1917, one of them later wrote that they had functioned not as a single party, but as a jumble of feuding political groups, which could make up an entire parliament. Perpetually on the brink of schism, their left, right, and center factions had intensified their feuds as the provisional government struggled throughout the summer and early fall. Then, as Kerensky's government tottered towards its final collapse, the party tilted sharply leftward, urged on by Maria Sherpadova, a dedicated terrorist whose passion for peasant revolution had survived a decade. Distrust of Bolshevik-dominated Soviets of workers' and soldiers' deputies had led these left SRs to insist that the peasants would have a voice in government equal to that of the workers. But when they shared enough in common with the Bolsheviks in those days to join them in a stormy alliance until their differences drove them to a final break the summer of 1918. Nowhere did their conflicting visions of Russia's revolutionary present and future divide Bolsheviks, Mensheviks, and socialist revolutionaries more explosively than the tumultuous Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets that assembled on the evening of October 25, 1917. The revolution had taught the art of filling space, Trotsky later wrote as he described how the throng in search of Russia's future had crowded into Smolny's Great Hall. Although he had long since grown accustomed to addressing revolutionary crowds in Russia's capital, he was surprised to see how overwhelming proletarian the assembly had become in the 4 months that had passed since the first All-Russian Congress of Soviets had met in June. A great color prevailed uninterruptedly in the costumes and the faces, Trotsky remembered. The plebeian nation had, for the first time, sent up an honest representation made in its own image and not retouched. Men and women of the people cared much less about the fine points of party programs than they did about land, peace, and bread, and they had little patience with any who did not share their view. Trotsky could not forget how their heavy and cracked hands, with wrists reddened from too much cold and fingers yellowed from smoking too many cigarettes, had thrust up among bristling bayonets when they had voted against the moderation urged by Martov's Mensheviks and other right-wing socialist revolutionaries. Their coats torn, their elbows frayed, these men and women of the people, crude and ignorant folk whose devotion to the revolution was spite and despair, while their socialism was hunger and an unendurable longing for rest, in the words of the Menshevik diarist Nikolai Sukhanov, voted that evening to change Russia's course forever. As passionate as any Bolshevik in his dedication to Russia's revolution, America's John Reed remembered how Trotsky had turned upon those who had promised compromise with Kerensky's shattered government that night, letting out his rich voice in cool contempt, while his pale, crude face measured the impact of his words upon his audience. "You are pathetic bankrupts," he had stated with unconcealed disdain. "Go where you belong from now on, to the trash bin of history." The Bolsheviks' rivals had no defense against such arrogance. I didn't believe in the victory, the success, the rightfulness, or the historic mission of the Bolshevik regime. I watched the celebration with a heavy heart. Yet their triumph in the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets did not assure the Bolsheviks of unchallenged authority in the new worker state they hoped to bring into being. During the next several months, many socialists dedicated to the ideas of peasant revolution, popular freedom, and social justice hurried to Russia's borderlands to join the armies of Denikin, the Czechoslovak Legion, and the forces of Komar in Siberia, rather than acquiesce in the Bolsheviks' crude seizure of power, while others remained in Petrograd and Moscow to challenge the Bolsheviks' proletarian dictatorship more directly. Chernov, whose undying insistence upon the impossible dream of party unity had paralyzed the socialist revolutionaries throughout 1917. National elections for Russia's Constituent Assembly in mid-November gave Chernov his first opportunity to challenge the policies of Sovnarkom, so long awaited by Russia's revolutionaries and so long postponed by the provincial government. The elections once again showed the Socialist Revolutionary Party's wide appeal. Yet, if read another way, the elections of 1917 showed that political power had shifted decisively from the Chernovs feuding. Not only had the Bolsheviks received nearly 10 million of the votes cast in the Constituent Assembly elections, but their strength had become extremely concentrated and well placed. Decisive majorities in Moscow, Petrograd, and other industrial centers gave Lenin and his lieutenants control of the garrisons and Red Guards in all the key areas of Central Russia. Beyond that, although run-on sentence. The naive failure of Chernov and his allies to perceive the threat posed by the Bolsheviks' strategically placed power base prevented them from claiming the fruits of their election victory, which, as a confrontation between purveyors of ideals and brokers of power, proved an unequal contest from the moment its delegates assembled on the afternoon of January 5th, 1918. The party, one commentator remarked, lost its nerve at the moment it was due to launch its decisive battle. And nothing proved that more dramatically than its members' failures to act decisively. Under the chairmanship of Ikov Surdilov, a Bolshevik whose imposing presence commanded more respect among men twice his age, and his youthful 32 years might otherwise have merited, the SRs elected Chernov the Assembly's chairman. Rambling, evasive, and inept, the vague formulas and flowery rhetoric in Chernov's opening speech revealed countless flaws in their armor, and to which the brilliant young Bolshevik orator Nikolai burst his verbal rapier with consummate skill when it came to his turn to reply. Savage, logical, speaking in a voice which plunged and struck. Is what you want a miserable little bourgeoisie republic? He asked with unconcealed contempt. Did Chernov propose to take centuries to win socialism for Russia? In the name of the great Soviet Republic of Labor, we would declare war to the death on such a government. While drunken workers, Red Guards, and Bolshevik sailors and galleries hooted, cursed, and amused themselves by aiming their rifles in Chernov's direction, they stubbornly pressed on with what the Bolsheviks knew, and many others feared, would be little more than a legislative charade. To cheers from the galleries, the Bolsheviks announced their withdrawal. Some hours later, to more cheers from onlookers, the left SRs did the same. Then, at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Bolshevik and left SR guards demanded that Chernov bring the session to a close. Hurriedly, Chernov presented a flurry of legislative acts for the approval of those who still remained. Then, as the galleries chanted, "That's enough! That is enough!" each phrase punctuated by the ominous clicks of rifle boots being slammed shut, Chernov announced that Russia's Constituent Assembly would convene that afternoon. The Bolsheviks decreed otherwise, explaining that the Constituent Assembly could only serve as a stream for the struggle of the counter-revolutionaries to overthrow Soviet power. They announced its dissolution several hours before delegates returned. To the armed men who closed the entrances from orders, the higher form of democracy, Chernov and his allies insisted that the Constituent Assembly is not dead, but there was more bravado than belief in the promise at the call of its president on the day set by him. The Constituent Assembly will gather to continue its work. A future as painful as any endured by the early monarchist and liberal opponents awaited many SRs as they began their wanderings to Siberia and beyond. At first, their dream of a Russian republic flickered along the Volga As the early successes, the Comac government offered them a brief moment of hope. A few months later, the dream revived further to the east in Ufa, only to be snuffed out by the rise of Admiral Kolchak's authoritarian government in 1918. Kolchak drove Chernov's SRs further toward historical trash bins, to which Trotsky had consigned them. Although the Socialist Revolutionary Party had been the beacon toward which millions of Russians had turned their guidance during the heady days of 1917, it remained only a will-o'-the-wisp flickering across Siberia's vastness a year later. The Bolsheviks' Menshevik opponents fared no better than Chernov's SRs. The elections to the Constituent Assembly showed all too clearly that the Mensheviks' failure to heed the demands of Russia's proletarians had reduced their strength to a fraction of its former dimensions. Not counting the votes cast in the faraway Caucasus region, the Mensheviks won less than 1 million votes in November 1917, denied any significant role in the Constituent Assembly, and unable to compel the Bolsheviks to moderate their other luminaries. While left and right SRs stubbornly held to their principles, a number of Mensheviks abandoned theirs. Although the more resolute among them joined the socialist revolutionaries in Siberia's various white governments, or made their way into exile after being expelled from the All-Russian Central Executive Committee in June 1918, those who remained in Russia's red heart purchased political survival at the terrible price of acknowledging the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917 had been historically necessary, and the Constituent Assembly counter-revolutionary. In return, the Bolsheviks briefly allowed them to publish a journal in Moscow. "We are quite willing to legalize you, Menshevik gentlemen," Lenin told them at the end of 1918, "but we shall reserve state power for ourselves alone." The Mensheviks' future in the Soviet state would be uncertain at best. As Lenin called for a relentless war against Menshevism, he emphasized, although he considered it more sensible to come to an understanding with petty bourgeoisie Democrats.
Are you the new Scarecrow? I think I met you last week. I just want to say what's up. How you doing?
I'm sorry. I'm doing quite well.
Cool. What are you reading? Oh, that's a big book. Do you like to read?
I used to like to read and sit down. Now
Yeah.
I have to read out loud. It's the only way I can right now. I
Like-
have to sit still. Yeah.
You can't focus when you're sitting still, kind of
I
thing.
guess I can. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's true. Sometimes when I'm sitting down and reading a book, I'm like,
It's
just like fall asleep. Yeah, I know. Yeah. What kind of books did you like to read?
There's this series, and instead of telling you what it's about,
Yeah.
I like to tell you how it's written.
Ooh, cool. Love that.
It's a lot like poetry. It's a lot like. This is really. I'm having a hard time kind of just like dealing with the details. There was like way more fun details, but now I'm getting the munch and crunch. But the stuff that I usually do like to read, it always has me feeling like there's something going around the corner.
Yeah,
I can't
like
ever
like
really-
you something to uncover, not just
Yeah,
like telling
exactly.
you exactly
That's
how
what
it
I'm
is.
trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That's really cool. So you like to think about and engage with what you're reading, not just like tell it to you straight.
It's always that second detail.
Yeah.
Best.
Come
Oh
on,
yeah.
okay.
Because
That's
the
so cool.
dots are like connecting.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's cool.
oh.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's difficult for me to read books that people offer me because like I want to go find the books.
Yeah.
I want to like discover instead of be like
Read this.
yeah. So that's kind of I think that if I could get past that, it would help me out a little.
Yeah, I mean, like, you just gotta look at it. Like, if someone's telling you to read something, it's probably because it's good. I mean, unless it's bad and they just have bad taste, but. I don't
That
know.
happened once. And I'm still. I gotta get
You're
over
still
it.
hug on
You know,
it.
I have to get over that. I
You do.
have
Come
to
on,
get
you
over
do,
that.
Scarecrow. Come on.
What book was it?
This was, it was actually called The Dinosaur Heresies. Yeah, and
Wow.
it has something to do with, like, how old a fossil is or something. There's just so much minutia. It's like, I feel like the whole thing could have just been written on, like, a paragraph. Like that.
Yeah. And they just dragged that way too long.
And so that, I guess,
Yeah.
I could never, this person, she was so animated by dinosaurs and stuff. She
Really?
really, like, yeah, there'll be a Jurassic Park one day, and she's gonna be there, and she's gonna be,
first in line, actually.
she's gonna be just as young as the day I met her. Because the dinosaurs are just gonna, like,
Keep her alive.
yeah, keep her alive.
That's funny. Yeah.
But, you know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that was more of a me and her thing than me and the books.
Yeah, you're like, I don't want to like what you like kind of thing.
Well, I never gave it back to people. I still have it. It's important.
Yeah, she's probably never going to see it again. It's so
I
sad.
gotta send it to her. I gotta send it to her. I know
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah. Interesting.
How's your week progressed?
It's been good. I
Yeah?
don't know. I'm just, yeah. I am at this school right now. Have you ever heard of YWAM?
No, I haven't.
It's like this missions thing. So I'm from Washington actually. And
Oh, I
came
love
here.
Washington.
Me too. It's so beautiful.
Oh my god.
So
Yeah, I
green.
definitely see you.
Yeah.
I see, yeah, oh my
You
god.
see Washington is yeah, I'm from like Seattle area. Well, small town Seattle area. But but yeah. Anyway, so I came here to Oakhurst. Do you know where Oakhurst
Yeah.
is? Yeah. So that's where my school is at. And basically it's like 6 months. So the first 3 months were on base.
Ah.
Man. Are you good? Okay. Is the book okay?
Oh, I thought I covered it.
Bless.
No, why not?
That's okay. You just listen.
Oakhurst?
Oakhurst, yeah. So 3 months in Oakhurst, we're learning about the Bible and about just about the Lord and His love for us. And then in 3 months, we get to go out on outreach. We're going to Japan for 3 months to share the
Oh,
gospel.
wow.
So that's super cool. I forget where I was going with this. Oh yeah, I was talking about my week. So yeah, this week, like each week, it's like usually like a topic. So we've done like Holy Spirit week of faith, learning about faith. What else? It's hard to remember. This week we're doing like learning about the Lord and His heart as like a father, and also like about intimacy with Jesus and like just getting to know Him basically. So yeah, it's been a little crazy. The Lord's been like really speaking to me. It's been kind of exhausting, like crying a lot and just like He's been like healing a lot of stuff in my own heart, and I'll share it with you if you want to hear it. But yeah, like cool. Can we sit on the grass? Is that okay? Is that okay? I'm sitting in this shade. Anyways. But yeah, Father Heart Week. Basically, it's just learning about the Lord's heart for us as a father. And for me, I've come to realize this week that, like, with my own dad, there's been a lot of, like, feelings of, like, rejection from him and stuff. And so, like, the Lord's just, like, and yeah, the way that my father, that I've grown up, and then it's just, like, that is affecting how I've seen the Lord as my father. And He's, like, telling me and reminding me, it's like, hey, like, I'm a good father, like, you can trust me kind of thing. And it's been really sweet, but also really, like, emotional. Like, a few years ago, my parents are divorced. That probably helps the story a little bit. But, so, like, my parents are divorced, and so my father, a few years ago,